Hi, in this video, I'm going to show you how to put together the heart light, which is an SVG file from Simply Crafty SVGs. So now these are just some of the parts to make it. This is one of the first boxes I made. So you can see that there's a little light on top, heart light bulb, opens up on the back to insert a tea light, and then it also serves as a gift box. Then you could also use them separately too. They're just glued together. So here are the pieces. So you can see on the right I have some of the labels, the little panels, that little print and cut, My Heart Glows For You. And that's the vellum panel and the front panels of the box. So all those red pieces are the heart, not the box, the actual heart light. And these are all actually part of that as well. So when we do the box, it's all going to be the red pieces. And then the silver pieces here are the little socket. So we're going to put that aside, and then the panels for the front and back. And then this white part is the box, and we'll put that aside as well. So we'll just get these two heart pieces and the side panels of the actual heart light. So how you know it's the top or bottom, one has two tabs, and the one with the rounded edges or corners is the tab will make the top of the heart, and then the bottom ones that are pointy will be the bottom piece part. So there's only one that has that little rounded one, so that's the one we'll glue together to two side pieces. So first, what you'll want to do is to curl the pieces and kind of get all the tabs primed. So you might want to curl it. You can do that on a corner of a, you could use other tools to do this. I use my hand, but I know some people use the edge of like rounded tables, I've been told. And anyways, you want to curl those pieces before we put them together, because it'll help shape the heart. And then you do want to go ahead and fold all the tabs to get them all ready. But that's not 100% necessary for this step, because first we're just going to put together these two pieces. So we'll fold down that all the tabs. We're going to focus on the one that's rounded. So that's the rounded tab on the left there. And we're going to fold it down into a mountain fold and then up in a valley. So I do it down first just to help prime it, but however works for you. So you see that's just going to be the inside fold of the top of the heart. So we're going to go ahead and attach these pieces. So a little heavy on the glue there, but I'm using art glitter glue in my little fine tip applicator bottle. I'm not convinced about that bottle quite yet. I've been having little issues with it. Else I would tell you all what it is, but there's a couple brands out there. A couple started failing for me. So you can just see I lined up that edge with the inside tab fold there. And I'm just really making sure it's secure. You want to make sure you don't get the edge past the fold, because you'll have to fold it inward. You'll see in a minute. I'm just letting it set for a second, and then at the same time, as it's setting, it's a good time to go ahead and fold those tabs down. So now you can see I'm just going to go like that, since it's that middle of the top of the heart. And that's what it'll be. Well, kinda. So once we get all these tabs folded, we'll go on to the next step. And I only like to get them primed. So we're going to be folding those kind of back and forth a little bit for different steps. But I like to get them nice and folded first before I start. So we're going to go ahead and attach them to these little skinny heart pieces, they're identical pieces on the front and back. So it doesn't matter which one you use. So we're just going to pick one. And we're going to go ahead and anchor. You see how that tab right there on the left there? to the left of the fold. We're going to anchor it. The first two tabs really, but it starts with that first one is critical because you want to get that little folded piece into the bend there of this panel. So that's the point of anchoring this. So we're going to go ahead and I just want to make sure that that little folded piece is in that as close to that bend as possible. And you can kind of look on the other side and adjust before it really gets sticks. So it's always that first one on either side that's going to be kind of critical to help you line up so the rest of the tabs will glue on well and around it. I always say round things aren't my favorite thing to do, but I have techniques that I hope that help some. It's just the way I found works for me. So we're going to go ahead now. Now you could do like 5 tabs, 6 tabs at a time, something like that, but you have to make sure that you don't just, you know how quickly your glue dries. So Scotch Quick Dry, for example, I would not put as much glue, but since I'm using art glitter glue, I know I can put a little bit more because it stays wet a little longer. So I'm just going to slide it under. So we're going to start with the tabs that we adhered, and then we're going to go from the top to the bottom. So I'm just pushing it in, making sure that that panel edge lines up to the inner fold of the tabs. And then I just applying pressure as I'm doing that against the table, and then I just continue to slide it in until we have them all adhered to that little skinny panel. And then what we'll do is just after we make sure that we're good there, we'll go ahead, flip it around, take a look, and then adhere the rest of them so you can see what it looks like on the inside. You know, don't rush this process. I mean, you'll get used to it. After you do a little bit, it gets easier. So the first one may not go so well. And so if you wanted to practice on a practice piece, if you're not used to this, that's always a good idea. So I'm just going ahead and adding glue to the remaining tabs. You can see you can kind of push them in a little bit, then flip it over and continue. So just start where you left off, at the tab you left off, and then go from top to bottom, making sure that edge is flush with the inside fold of those tabs. If it's a little bit off, not a big deal. I mean, for the front and back panels will hide any kind of flaws like that. So we're going to do the same on the other side. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm anchoring 2 tabs, and I'm going to start with that middle one. Get it as close to that little center fold. And then making sure, what I'm doing is I'm feeling around, making sure that that edge is flush with the tab fold on the inside tab fold. And then we're going to continue around like we did last time. So you can go ahead and continue watching this. So the tip is, I mean, again, make sure you don't put glue on too many tabs. And then you want to always go from where you left off and then go around and kind of rotate it as you go. So part of it, make sure it's in the good for your, comfortable for your hands, so you may need to move it around. A lot of times I have to move it a certain way to make sure that you can see it on camera. So that's really not my natural way of doing it, but you know, I mean, the point of this is to show you. And I'll show you a different alternate way. So the other side is going to be the same thing. So what's nice about it is that we have an open side. So after you attach this, we'll do the other side, and you can still reach in because there's not a solid panel on, which is why I chose this method. And also I needed it open so I could have one side to glow the tea light through and the other side to be able to place the tea light. So that last one, be careful with those really bottom tabs and make sure they're nice and flush. I did have to pull this off, and I wanted to show you not accidents, but if it's shifted a little bit, just try to get it off before it dries too much. So I was lucky enough to do that without having to start over. And then I have my little wet paper towel to pick up any of the excess glue. So now we have this piece, and so we're going to have to put on the other side. And then afterwards, after we go both sides, one side's going to have this and the other side is going to have the back panel. So you can see how that'll just glue onto the edge there. So the same thing, just make sure that you get it. I'm actually not going to. I'm gonna skip some of this, the assembly on this side, but I wanted to show you again how to attach and anchor those first two, because that's, to me, that's the critical part about this whole, anything like this or any other. I have other heart designs that are round, like the heart box, and other round items that don't have a lot of score lines. That's the reason why we put sometimes score lines. I don't like to make it difficult for people making my designs. I want it to be a pleasant experience. If you're really advanced, you don't care. You want the challenge. But a lot of people have, precious time on their hands, and they just want to craft something after work or on the weekends or something like that. So this time I actually did both sides. So you could do that too. So as you can see, we jumped ahead. We already glued one side of the other side panel, either the back or front, because it's interchangeable. So you can reach in, just to show you still can reach in, even once you have that very first piece in. You just have to go more by, I could see it really well, but on the camera you can't, so you just have to be at an angle that you can see it, and still guide the tabs underneath from top to bottom from the top of the heart to the bottom of the heart. And then we'll go ahead and glue these last pieces. Now some people also like to do it from the top, so you could actually fold them over. As you're folding them over, you can kind of feel, so you could have it, you can be looking at it. I'm going to show you shortly here. Go ahead and you could just do this. And you kind of have to feel to make sure that that edge is on the inside edge of that tab, but you can kind of reach around and apply pressure tab by tab. And that's helpful when you always get to the bottom anyways. So that's a different way to do it if that's your preference, especially on the second side, because it's harder to get your hand in. And I know I kind of have a little stubby hand. I didn't want this design to be huge, so that's why the heart's not huge, because I knew I wanted to put it on another box and it was going to be big that way. So that bottom part will go on, but we're not going to put it on right now. We're going to wait a little bit. We'll go ahead and add the panels to the front and back. So I used the same pattern paper for the box, the bottom box that they'll attach to, and for the heart light. So I mean, you could always switch it up. It would look cute with different tones that coordinate with the color that you're using on the box and the heart light. So this will basically center. So you want to make sure, what I use to guide is make sure it's centered on the top and the middle, and then that the scallops are kind of, you can tell that they're in the right place according to the main panel, and then you'll have a little edge and on offset on each side. So you can see equidistance around. And then here we go with the vellum panel. So my suggestion for this is, I went a little too high on this when you watch this, but you want to go lower as possible, as low as possible. So what I mean by that, see right where I have the glue right now? We're going to want to put the bottom edge there and then pull it down a little bit more so it doesn't pop up on the top. It is the right size, it's just a matter in the way that you apply it or you glue it on. So put a light bead glue around the edge. And I would suggest doing it on the red piece so you know exactly, so you don't get glue where it can be seen. And then just lightly apply glue, like dot it around. Make sure you don't put like heavy dots or anything, because as you apply, you don't want it leaking onto the vellum where you can see it. So if it's a little thick in places, you can go ahead and use your finger or another tool to get the excess off, but do that before you put the vellum on. I got lucky on this one, but I did have a little glue leak through. So that's something that I did because I knew I had a little heavy areas there. And then of course I had to wipe my hands off. So always I have a wet paper towel on the side ready to wipe my hands off or get the excess glue off any box or project I work on. So start at the bottom, go a little bit further down than what I did. You kind of can see through it, so you want to just be really careful. And all you care is that it adheres on the left and right. So I resized that vellum panel just a little bit on the top so it doesn't try to jut out just in case you go too far. When I had resized this down, but for some reason I don't have a guide for you to figure out where to put it, so you just kind of eyeball it. So I just had to adjust that a little bit to help. Then on the back, this just centers on, so you want to put that on first. So this will be the opening for the tea light. So I just put light glue, and you could actually, I mean, I prefer glue, but I mean, if it were flat, you could probably do like a tape adhesive or something like that. But you just want to make sure it's strong, and with time, then it won't come apart. You can see there's like a little edge around the opening, so it should be. It doesn't match up completely. I have a little edge opening around the. You should see a little red around that opening. And then just make sure it's centered on the outside. And this is a flap. So it's gonna, you can see I folded it back and then up. And then we just went ahead and centered that little panel onto that flap. And then this little embellishment. So once we get that glued on, we'll go ahead and glue that top tab to the inside of that panel so it's not seen. So we'll just go ahead and get that on, and just make sure that the heart's upright so you know which way it is, or you can omit it, you don't need to use it. So we're going to go ahead and add glue to the top of this tab, and then insert it in and glue it to the back side. Just make sure you line up that top edge to the inside fold, and then once you get it glued, we'll just go ahead on to the next step. We'll put it aside until we add it to the actual heart. We're going to work on the socket, or the little socket, light socket piece. So we have a couple pieces here. We have this piece, which is the big top part, and then these are the things that wrap around it to kind of make the little filament things around the socket. I think I'm saying the wrong thing, but hey, I think you get the idea. So that'll go, see the longer tabs are for the bigger piece there, and this smaller one's for the bottom. So we'll go ahead, I already folded the other piece, we'll go ahead and fold this piece. I'm using a thick basil cardstock, metallic. So it's a little bit hard to manipulate, a little bit harder than American Crafts. But I did like the sheen on this cardstock, so I went with it. So we'll go ahead and add glue to this little end tab here. So fold back those tabs. I pre-folded them, but we went to go flat. So just fold over one piece like that, and you can just add glue to the tab. And then what we'll do is fold over the other side and match up that other side edge to the tab fold. should match up pretty perfectly, and you can adjust it, and the nice thing is you can lay it flat and apply pressure. So with metallic pieces, if you don't do it a lot, it takes a little longer to glue with some of the glues. It depends on the glue. But I did know with art glitter glue that I was going to have to hold it longer than I would traditional textured paper, because of the sheen on it and how it's slippery on top. So it does take a little bit longer. So I do tend to let that dry a little bit longer than I would when I'm working with, let's say, American Crafts. So now we're going to go ahead and glue that larger decagon. It's that 10-sided piece onto the side which has the longer tabs. So we're going to go ahead and anchor one tab. So you want to line it up to one side of that. It's really a decagon. It's a 10-sided polygon. There. And we just make sure it's lined up. And then again, I'm taking a long time to hold it because it's metallic paper. Then once I felt it was dry enough, because you know, no matter what you're working with, you want to make sure it's dry before you move on. We'll go ahead and add glue to all these little tabs. And then we'll go ahead and just fold it down. Now, you want those tabs to be a little bit up. But the nice part about this is that we still can reach in to apply pressure from inside because it's not a closed object. So we'll just get them set in place, and then we can always reach in and apply pressure either with a small tool or with our fingers. So the way I do this is I just kind of fold it over carefully and not a lot of pressure at first, because we want to adjust it until we get it lined up properly. So we can start and just kind of go around and kind of push it, and you kind of can push it around and pop sides out until it's lined up. As it lines up with each side, I apply a little pressure on that edge. And then once I have it in place, I can go ahead and I'm just rubbing along the tabs. Then we can go ahead and either reach in or use a tool. This is a wooden chopstick, so I felt it was easier for me to put my finger in there. But anything that has a blunt end that can help you apply pressure against those tabs is going to help. And again, if you do use metallic paper, just give it a little longer. Or if you have a trick, or you have your favorite glue with metallics. I don't particularly, it's not my most favorite thing to have to deal with metallics because I'm a messy gluer. So when I glue, I tend to get glue places, so I really have to have a wet paper towel to get it off, and some metallics don't clean up really well, so it just depends on the paper. So we're going to do the same, but I'm going to attach this to a tab near where the seam of the top one. So I like just to keep the seams close to each other, so at least I can designate what's going to be the back of it for me. So I'm starting the first tab close to the seam that on the top. So I'm just lining it up, and you see I attach the piece with the tab on it first, because as I go around I will glue it last. I know it's overlapping, but it does work. So once we get that first one, we're just going to fold it around and apply glue each tab carefully. Because of the shape of this, it's really important to kind of be as precise as possible, so do take your time on this piece. Sometimes when I'm doing pieces like this, I'm folding it around and I find out I didn't line it very well on that first one, so then the actual score lines or folds are off a little bit. But you can adjust it a little bit with paper, so paper's an interesting thing. It has a little bit more give than you know. And I tried other methods of putting this together, or of how you could put this together, but this seems the easiest to get your fingers in the whole time, all the way around. So when I do these videos, I do, before I do the final, I try different ways of doing it before I do the final, because my goal when I'm showing you how to put something together is trying to make it as simple as possible. But the reality is that sometimes some of the 3D designs are not as easy as others. There's no easy way. Sometimes it takes flipping around, folding, getting your fingers in fine little places, and etc., etc. So, but that's my goal. So when we get to this last piece, so I didn't add glue to the last tab, I'm just going to kind of move it over and add glue to the final tab on the large piece, and then that little tab on the end. It's okay, they can overlap. We just want to get them attached, so I kind of push down that end tab and line it up. So the end tab will have a little glue underneath it, so that'll work. So once it's good and dry, and you see I do take my time, I'm going to fold those in. Although we're going to attach that top hexagon the same way we did the bottom. So we'll do that, and then we can move on to the next step. So as we did before, we're going to anchor one section. So we're going to line up one section of that polygon to the tab fold. Then we're going to go ahead and anchor it, and then just fold it over like we did the first one. The difference is you can't apply pressure from the other side. So what we need to do, it should line it fairly well on its own, but you just want to go and lightly rub along each of the tab areas as long as it's aligned, and I'm just double checking it's aligned as I go around. And again, it should be pretty aligned, and then just rub around the tab areas and apply pressure to get it to secure. And then we're going to end up putting it aside, which will help it glue a little, dry a little bit more before we attach it to the actual heart. So now we have this piece, so we'll do this first. So this is going to go around, and I'm showing you one piece. We're going to attach those two pieces, but so you can get an indication how it's going to go around. So you want to curl them. So I'm just curling them with my fingertips because they're really thin. And there's one end that is not rounded, so you want to put a little glue on one end, and we're going to attach these two pieces so we can wrap it around. So you can see it's like a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch maybe. So we're just going to glue those two together, and then you'll just want to wait a bit, make sure that they're glued together before you go on and to the next step, which is wrapping it around the socket piece we just created. So now it's sat for a minute, so everything's good and dry. So I'm going to start from the back. So I'm going to find where that seam is. I'm deeming which is the back, and I'm going to start to the panel to the left, basically the back panel. So you want to look at it, see where you want to start, and then we're going to start wrapping it around. And as it wraps around, we're going to kind of angle it downwards. Like if you ever see a light bulb, you see that I don't know what they're called. I'll have to look it up. But I call them filaments. But how they're kind of wrapped around and you can see a slight angle like that. We're going to eyeball that and do that. So what we'll do is add a little glue to one side, the first side. Just not that much because you don't want it to show. This is just to get it started and anchored. So throughout this whole process, I didn't want to make it with little folds. I wanted to look round, so it's just easier to wrap it around this way. So I'm going to hold it for a sec, and once we get that secure, we'll start wrapping it around. So I'm kind of pulling. As I pull to apply pressure, I'm creating a slightward downward angle. And it's slight. And you could do it to your taste, whatever you want. But at one point, I'm going to add a little glue. So you don't have to do it along the whole thing, but I'm just going to add it along. I just want it enough so as I'm doing it, it stays in place. So whether that be every third or fourth panel. So I'm kind of holding that in place. And always have my little wet paper towel to get rid of the excess. And then I'm kind of angling it down. So if you want to do a dry run and see how you want to do it, that's up to you. But I'm just eyeballing it as I go. So you can see how far apart that I've done mine just based on your taste. And you could always shorten them if you wanted to. But if you were going to shorten them, I would cut them. This is something to test. This is a good enough test. So let me go back. If you wanted to test this, I would test wrap around by adding the two pieces together, maybe with a test piece of cardstock, and then wrapping it around and see how it works for you. If you prefer something shorter or something like that, if you did want to cut them, it would be so simple just to cut them at the straight, each side of those two pieces straight. But I tried different sizes, and this is the one I came up with. And you can just continue wrapping it around and just periodically adding glue in different pieces just to help stabilize it and hold it in place. The reason I didn't make this piece round, it's very difficult at this size with the way that I built it with that little angle at the bottom, to put together a round piece without it looking kind of wonky. So it's just easier to make it like a polygonal type of round object. Makes it easier for you to put together. So you can see I'm kind of angling downward, and then I'm just adding glue to the last. Getting my hand all twisted there because I'm holding a piece. And then I'm watching the distance that I keep between it and just kind of pulling it taut. And then when I get it to the place I want, I'm just going to hold it at the very end. So there it is. I thought it gave it the effect I wanted without it being too difficult. So like I said, I intentionally started a certain place, so it ended in the same place, and I'm just really calling that the back. So wherever it starts is really where I'm calling it the back of it. So we're going to go ahead and add this panel on the bottom of the heart, and we're going to attach a little socket piece to it. So it's the wider part, and just make sure your texture is showing on the outside because it'll be visible. We're going to line that edge of that piece to the inside fold of that tab. Then we'll go ahead and glue it to these other 3 tabs. So you just want to fold it over, line it up. And the nice part is that you can reach from inside to apply pressure. One place is where the 3 places I see you might want to go around the edge really well because it could, that front and back edge. Couple times I didn't get enough glue in it, and I had add a little glue with the fine tip applicator, so I'm not really showing you applying pressure on the front and back, but make sure you focus on those as well. And once we get this all secure, we're going to go ahead and glue on the socket piece that we just created. So the pointy side should be on the side, so there should be like a point, and it should be flat on the front, if that makes sense. So you can kind of see how I arranged it. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see it better. So you can just fit it the way you think looks good. but I'm careful not to add glue too close to the edges because I want to have a little bit of adjustment. So I'm just making sure I'm choosing which is the front and back right now. And you can see the pointy, that little pointy side there. So you're going to have it a fold on each side. And you're going to see how it's centered in a minute here. And it's pretty much takes up almost the width of that bottom panel. And you see there's a flat side on the front and back. So I'm holding it together with my fingers on the inside and then against the bottom of that little socket piece. And you want to do that for a little while to make sure it's good and secure. And then I applied pressure against the table as well. So this is the point of not putting together that heart light piece yet until we have this on. So one thing is just make sure that you let it dry long enough before you go on to the next part. Now we're going to go ahead and add the panels. So here's the front panel, and you'll line that bottom piece. So there's a bottom portion of that top panel that lines up with that bottom of the heart, and then you can see how it lines up there. So you can get an idea how it's going to go on. So make sure you kind of know how it's going to go on first, and then we'll go on and add the glue around the edges. So we'll just go ahead and add glue around the edges, and just make sure you get it good or liberal around the edge as possible. And then when we put this panel on, we're going to line that bottom edge, that bottom section should match it exactly to the width of that bottom edge of the box. And then you have to do a little bit of adjustment before you really press it down. So you want to make sure that that middle of the heart is lined up on the panel. And then once you get it in place, like I said, the vellum shouldn't show. It was just I pressed it too high, but I fixed that. So once we get it in place, we're going to just hold it down, and then we can go ahead and reach in either with your fingers or with the tool to run it along that edge to get it good and secure. So you want to make sure you do it long enough, make sure that it doesn't pop off. And you can see now it's secure. And then we'll go ahead, once we do that, we'll go ahead and do the back one. The back one you won't be able to reach in, but basically you'll be able to put a tea light in and see it through that front vellum piece. So that's what that little flap is for. And turn that off. So now with the back piece, once you get all the glue around the edges, you want to do the same thing. You're going to line up that bottom edge of the panel to the bottom edge of the heart. So it should fit perfectly in that little section on the bottom. That's what you're using to line this up. Then the only thing is adjusting it left and right to get that middle of that heart panel matched up with the middle of the heart. So same thing once you get it in place. Excuse me. A frog just in my throat. Didn't want to stop video. I didn't want to stop talking. You can go ahead and rub around the edges. Just lightly, but you really, you can give it some pressure because you have it against the table. So it takes some good time to do that. And then you can see this will fold up. Now we're going to put a little bit of a Velcro piece on it, so it doesn't, when it closes completely, but that's up to you what you want to do. I mean, you could put a little glue dot that's a repositionable glue dot. That would be easy to do. But you see how it just sits in there? And that's it. And then close. But we'll go ahead and I'm going to show you, I just cut a little Velcro dot We'll take that out. I took a little small Velcro dot, and I cut it really small enough so you couldn't see it when it opened. And that wasn't small. I had to cut it a little bit smaller. So I just went over and got rid of the middle, a little bit of the middle there. So you just want to size it. So I have the top and bottom together, and then I'll cut them, trim them a little bit. You can find those at like any craft store or Walmart, or if you're in the US, I'm not quite sure what they have outside of the US. So I'm going to put one side on the edge here. I'm not going to adhere it yet. I just wanted to make sure it was in the right place. You could use a little pencil mark if you wanted, or something like that. The way I do it when I'm using Velcro is I just put that one side, line it up with the edge there. So that's the sticky side, and here's like the soft side. I'm just going to stick it right on there with the backing still on. And then I'm going to take the backing off carefully to expose the adhesive. Then I'm going to press it down lightly because it's exactly where it needs to be. Then I want to try to get it stuck on that top piece, and then it did. There it is. So now I have a easy way to close it. And now I can move on to the bottom box piece. So this is just a simple rectangular box. So we have these two pieces to the box, and then we have these panels we add on. So I've already added those two pieces, and you can see they're lined up at the bottom. Then we're just going to go ahead and add these two pieces. So what you want to do is kind of get it towards the bottom, so on the long side, which is the front, there's going to be a little space on the left and right and on the bottom. So that little decorative edge on the top corresponds to the decorative edge on the lid. So when we put the lid on, it'll go with the lid shape. So the same thing with the side panel. It looks like it's higher because of the colors. It is the same pattern paper, but just different portions of it. It was just a Valentine paper I had from, I think it's K&K Company. And then I already put that top one on this panel, and then this little piece on the side. So just center that top panel. And then we'll go ahead, that lines up to the shape on the side of the lid sides, or so the light, or whatever, the lid flaps, or what are those called? The edges of the lid. And you see there's a circle in the middle there on that top panel, and that's where the bulb's gonna sit and be glued on. So with this is just a standard lid, so we're gonna glue these tabs underneath the adjacent edges, and we're just lining up that edge to the tab fold. And you just hold it in place, and just make sure it's good and folded on the score lines before you try this process. I had already pre-folded them. Another tip, I didn't use them, but you can use little clothespins to hold tabs in place. I've done it in the past where I'm doing a lid or something, and I have some clothespins that I got at a craft store, or even I think I got some at Target or in some store for cheap, and you could just clip them on the tabs you just glued after a little bit secure to hold them in place. So I just line it up with my finger, that edge to the tab fold. It's a pretty standard box, so they all go together the same way. And then this last one. Then after this, we'll go ahead and put the bottom box together, which is again pretty standard. The lid's done. So we put that aside and we're going to go ahead and put together this box. So we're going to go ahead and add glue to this little side tab. And then you want to line up that other edge to the tab fold, up to the tab fold, not over, and line it up on the top as well. And then once you get it in place, just apply some pressure. And then we'll go ahead and turn it over and glue that other tab. So the nice thing about square or polygonal boxes is that you can kind of fold it over and it'll line it up for you. But you just make sure that it's lined up at the top and the edge and everything else still. Because if you're a little bit off, it might be a little bit off. So for this one I did it a little bit different. I don't want to have a separate panel, so I have two big panels. One's going to go on the inside and one's going to go on the outside, just to give it more finished look. It's going to go like that. Once we have it all glued. So we'll go ahead and add glue to these two side tabs first. When you're doing this, just be really careful making sure that that tab that's folded in is lined up with the inside edges of these two side tabs. Else it'll get a little off kilter, or it won't be quite right. So I'm going to just fold them over, and I can't really tell. I mean, I'm kind of folding that over so I can apply pressure and actually press that bottom panel into the tab on the sides, just to make it quote unquote square, at least the corner square, even if it's a rectangular box. And then we'll go ahead and add glue onto that bottom one. So it's just finishing off the box. Some boxes or some treat boxes, I usually don't finish them off this much and just let the tabs be on the bottom. Because, you know, honestly, the people that you give it to, or if you just use it for display, whatever it is, most people don't flip it over. But I know a lot of crafters are particular about things being finished, so I'm doing more finishing in some of my designs. And it makes it more sturdy too. So that box is pretty sturdy to hold a little small gift or a gift card or whatever people are going to use it for. I say just give me cash. I'm good with cash. So now we have that done. So the lid just slides over, and you can see how those panels complement the lid shape. And then we'll put a little saying on the front. So either side is the front, lengthwise. So this is a little print and cut tag that included with the file. It can only be print and cut. So if you have a print and cut capable machine like Cricut or Silhouette, where you print it out on your printer and then cut out the tag, that's what that's for. Or you can put whatever you want on it. But I thought that was a cute saying for the heart. And once we have that on, we're going to glue the two pieces together now. So we're going to glue it onto the top of the lid, but the lid is kind of, because of the cut of the edges, we're going to keep it on the box for the first part here. So we're going to center right in that circle, or do the best to center it in a circle. And we're going to glue it right to the top. So I'd add glue to the bottom of this. Again, for a little wiggle room, don't add glue right to the edges. Just kind of get the middle, get enough there because it really has to adhere. But you don't want it rippling through your paper either on the other side. So know your glue. Some glues are wetter than others. So I'm just getting it centered and aligned. So you want that front, to make sure that front faces the front of the box. And then I'm kind of applying a little pressure to get it set first. So once it's set in place, I'm going to lift off the lid and apply pressure a different way. But you want to be real careful. So now I can apply pressure with my fingertips inside. And then you just continue to hold it until it's good and secure. And that'll finish the project. After that's dry, you'll go ahead and just add the lid back to the top of the box, and you have a box ready for a nice little Valentine's or anniversary gift. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, could you please give me a little like down there, or thumbs up down there, and or subscribe. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for watching.